Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm your host, Cesar Carino, and our guest today is someone who is very, very well known in Wadsworth and has been around Wadsworth for years and years and years, about 78 of them, I believe, Maxine Wagner Granger. Maxine, I just told your age, and I wanted to make sure that's okay.
That's fine with me.
It's fine with you.
Can't deny it.
Maxine, tell us a little about, let's start with you. What day were you born, and where were you born, who your parents were, who your mom was, who your father was, brothers and sisters, and so forth and so on. Let's
Well, I
take a
was
few
born
minutes for
on the
that.
Medina County line, on the Summit County side, and July the 5th.
And where was it
1921.
geographically? Where?
Right across from the great big farm where Harold Fix used to live.
From where Harold
On
Fix used to live,
Reimer
on
Road.
Reimer Road. So that's north of 261 on Medina
That's
County Line Road,
Right.
and south of what would be the closest road south?
South of it would be the one that goes into Copley.
Yeah.
Up above.
So it's about a mile and a half north of 261,
Of
right?
261,
Yeah, on the
yeah.
east side of the road. Okay. And who were your parents?
And my father was Avery Wagner, and my mother was Laura Cook Wagner.
Laura Cook
And
Wagner.
my grandfather was Jared
Wagner.
Wagner.
And they were from Wadsworth too.
Right, and they were threshermen.
Right, that's exactly
And,
right. We're going to be talking about that at length in a few minutes because that's something that we don't do anymore. We don't thresh anymore. It's all done,
right.
you know, with machines from the fields and so forth. And I have vivid memories of, you know, the threshing machine being pulled back behind the great big Huber tractor and so forth and so on. And we'll be talking about that. Tell us how long you lived on the Medina County Line Road before you moved to another place in Wadsworth.
Well, we moved to Summit Street after that and had all of this machinery up on the hill behind the house. And
Now, Summit Street right now is completely filled with houses. What was it
Right.
like then, Maxine?
it was pretty empty. I think
Really
there
empty.
were only maybe 3 or 4. And the garage was under the house. And
It was one of the last houses on Summit Street on the east side of the street, was it not?
that's right.
Right.
That's right.
And as you look back, which is now Oak Street and all of the houses in McEntee Drive and
was all
Baird,
farm.
it was all farmland. And that's very significant because you went catty-cornered from there over to Route 261 and you lived there for a while. And we're going to be talking about that. Who was born at the time, and are you the oldest in the family?
I'm the oldest, and I have a sister, Beatrice, who lives in Texas.
She is a couple, 3 years younger than you. Is it 2 years younger?
One.
1 year younger than you?
One.
And then Jean is what, 4 or
And
5?
then Jean, 5.
And then Faye,
And then Kay is 15 years
15
younger.
years
She
younger than
lives
you.
in Worcester.
Worcester. Now then, tell us a little bit about, well, you have a brother also between you
I
and
had a
me.
brother, yes, and he died of polio.
In 19, probably 30, something like
Right,
that.
right.
It's very, very sad. I don't remember it, obviously, but I remember the old farmers talking about, you know, this poor child who had died. Infantile paralysis, they called it at that
Right.
time. And it was a long time before they got a vaccine to handle that. Avery Wagner and his father was
Jared.
Wagner, and they were threshermen. Where did Jared Wagner live?
Well, he lived in the house where I grew up most of the time on 261.
On 261.
Right across from what is now Bent Creek.
Bent Creek, right, and where there's a large
Yeah. Well, that was a farm, and a
farm.
Wancha farm.
Wancha.
Yeah,
Now,
Alex.
tell us a little bit about your progenies, or rather, I'm sorry, your siblings. Beatrice is where?
She's in Texas.
And whom
Yeah.
did she marry?
She married Jim Murphy from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. We don't know Jim
And,
Murphy then.
They both went to Hiram College.
Hiram.
That's where she met him.
Right. And who was, and then Jean is...
And then Jean married Leroy George.
Right, who is from Wadsworth.
That's right, a mechanic who also worked for Dad.
Did they live here yet in Wadsworth?
No, they're both gone. They're both gone.
They both died? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh.
Jean died about 5 years after Ralph did.
Oh, I did not know
And
that.
then
I'm so sorry.
Lee 4 years after that.
Yeah, and I knew that Lee was gone, I guess, but I didn't know that Jean was gone. And then Kay is...
Kay is the youngest one, and she lives in Worcester. She just retired.
Just retired from what?
Let's see. Can't think of the name of it. It'll come to me.
Oh, surely. That's what we have. That's our favorite word in this program, because it does come a little bit later. Tell us about your growing up days, with whom you grew up, some of your playmates, and things of that nature.
Well, one of my close was Harriet Gates.
And Harriet Gates lived at Clark's Corners at the time.
Right.
And you did not live close to her, but you became acquainted.
Down on 261, but we did a lot of bicycle riding, and came down in your area.
In the Silver Creek area.
And Harriet used to go down and practice with your brother, Chris.
Yes, she was my brother's accompanist. He played violin and she accompanied. She's a tremendously good pianist.
One of my good close friends was Pat Stanley.
Yes, who was...
she lives over in Barberton.
In Barberton, 25th Street.
25th Street.
All right. And who were some of the other... Then you went to school with these people too, did you not?
Right, with Chris, Everett Perkins, Joe Klosterman.
Right.
They were all in my class.
Did you go to centralized school?
Sure did.
Surely did. Everyone went to centralized school who lived out in the farms. Now, who were some of your teachers? I know that Laura Gates was your first grade teacher.
She was one of them. Vining.
May Vining.
Mrs. Vining.
Laura Gates taught our family to speak English.
Right.
We could not speak
Is
English,
that
and she
correct?
taught us, the four of us, to speak English.
Mrs. Hale. Cooter.
Mary Louise
Charlie.
Cooter, and she just died.
Charlie's
Cousin, Zelda Cooter.
Cooter was my 4th grade teacher, and I just...
She's a beautiful woman.
Oh, I had such a terrible time that year.
Really?
That was a rough year.
Why was that?
I don't know.
But she was a beautiful woman. She was.
The rest of it was fairly easy.
She was visually impaired. She wore kind of a rose-colored glasses all the time. And do you remember some of the other ones?
Miss Goodman, who married Mr. Rohr.
Ralph Rohr, yes. Inez Goodman. She just died not too long
Schultz.
ago. Raymond Schultz, who's dead. Vernon V. Isham.
Right.
Who was the principal.
At that time.
He's dead also.
Right.
A lot of those, Miss Iden.
Right.
Miss Steiner.
Baldwin. Brittlinger.
Brittlinger, you had her?
She was...
Miss Hartman at the time.
Anyway. That's all I can
You can remember them. That's a tremendously good memory that you had. What do you remember about the times? You started school in 27?
26 or 7.
27, right. What were the times like at the time? And do you remember when the Depression hit?
Well, I didn't really know that I wasn't well off. You know, everybody was in the same boat.
Right.
So
we're all poor.
Right, and so you all helped each other and got along, had your own garden.
By this time you're living on 261, right?
Did a lot of canning.
A lot of canning.
So
that's what kept you through the winter, because there was no money to buy anything.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your high school days, some of the things that you did in high school, which I think were very interesting.
Well, I was kind of shy at that time, and I didn't do a whole lot of things, but I loved baseball. And
I think that's what I'm talking about here, that you were an extraordinarily good baseball player.
I was good.
You were good.
We had a neighborhood full of boys, and I think I was probably the only girl out there.
Who were some of the boys with whom you played baseball?
Tom Ream.
Tom Ream.
And his brothers, and Kemmer Bucks.
Bucks lived just to the east of you.
He lived on Hartman Road. Hartman Road. Well, Hellers live out there, but they were older at the time, so they didn't play with us. But anyway.
Now, Irene Heller, does you remember Irene Heller?
Oh, yes.
And who was she? She married?
She married Klotz.
Yeah, Dr. Klotz, Irene Heller.
Yeah. We all traveled on the school bus together. As a matter of fact, I think my first year was the first motorized school bus.
That is correct.
And it was driven by Mike Rohr.
Mike Rohr.
Mike Rohr.
Mike Rohr lived on
94.
94.
On
He
a
had
farm.
his wife was gone, and he had an older daughter, Edna, and then they had a son who was killed in the war.
Right about in the area where Night's Inn and
That's right,
so on.
right there. Mike Rohr drove the school bus. He had his youngest daughter was Ruth Rohr.
And then his son was in our class also.
And he was the one that was killed in the war. Right.
No, not
was
that one,
the other
no.
one then? It was Bill Rohr was killed in the war, was he not?
Yeah, because Mike was younger than some of the other ones.
I see.
Not Mike, but Richard. Richard.
Richard Rohr. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Then he moved to, after we graduated and so on, I worked on the farm, and then he moved to Arizona, and was the custodian for schools out there.
Is that right? I did not know that. Ruth Rohr married Bill Beck, and Beck was with the telephone company as an installer.
And the older girls that were on the bus took care of all of us younger children.
Oh boy, did they. I
Yes.
still remember Catherine Garvin telling me where to sit, and I could not sit on the sides because that's where the older kids sat. We had to sit in the middle.
And Connie Dress.
Connie Dress, right.
And so, yeah, they took care of us.
Right.
Made sure.
Now, you remember that Mike Rohr was your first bus driver. And do you remember any of the other school bus drivers?
No.
Don't remember them. And do you remember what kind of vehicle it was in 1927?
Well, it seemed very short, and there were just benches.
Just benches?
And bench down the middle. And there probably were about 18 children.
Probably.
That's
Wasn't very big.
No.
Probably a Model T or an old Chevy or something like that. And they used to build they were out of wood. And some of the farmers would build those, and they would help carry kids then, right?
I think it had canvas over the top of it.
After the canvas over the top, I think you're right. What happened then after you finally graduated from high school? What did you do?
Well, I went to Baldwin Wallace College.
And what did you study there?
Music.
Music. Now, you're an accomplished musician, is that correct?
Well, pretty good.
Pretty good. And what was your instrument?
Voice and piano.
Voice and piano.
I started singing in a Methodist choir at the age of 15. Took voice lessons from King Sears.
King Sears.
And then I graduated in 43.
From Baldwin Wallace College.
Wallace.
You graduated from high school in 39?
39.
That's right. Who were some of the other people from Wadsworth who went to Baldwin Wallace College at the same time?
At that time, there weren't any.
Well, Harriet
Yes.
Harriet Gates
But,
Dressler.
She's the only one that I knew that was from here.
Now, my brother went, but he was working at the time. Then he called it the service. Well, two of my brothers went, as a matter of fact.
And then
They were
he
called
came
to the
back.
service, and they came back afterwards. They went to Baldwin Wallace College, too. It was a good little school. Do you remember your tuition for the whole year, room and board and everything else?
$800.
$840 is what we paid for room, board, tuition,
That's
meals,
right.
absolutely everything.
That's right.
And many people didn't have the $840 to do it.
That's right.
And at the same time, the University of Akron was $25 a whole year just for the tuition.
That's
So,
right.
you know, it was
But that made it rough for Dad, because then Bee came along,
Right.
and so she went to Hiram, and hers was the same thing, 800.
Yeah, that would be, we think right now, $800, you can do that with, part of a week's salary, but that was a lot of
but everything
money.
is relative
That's
to the
right.
time.
What did you do with your music after you graduated from high school, or from college?
I taught, the first year that I taught was in Holmesville. My salary was $1,800.
In Holmesville?
For the whole year.
And Holmesville is where?
It's down below Worcester.
It's in...
Holmes County.
In Holmes County, right. Mm-hmm.
Well, I taught a little bit of everything. I taught high school English. I taught phys ed. I taught all the music in the school that year. I had a band after school. One of the teachers left in the middle of the year, and I taught commercial law. And I had a student in that class that I had to study every night to keep ahead of her, because that was certainly not my subject.
Not your area.
But I think I learned more
Than the students did.
that year than I did.
How long did you teach, Maxine?
It was kind of sporadic. I didn't teach full-time all the time. But I didn't like teaching the music in the school. So I went back and took my elementary work and taught third grade after that.
And
just
where?
loved it. Here in Wadsworth and in Orville.
In Orville and Wadsworth. You didn't go back to Holmesville.
No.
Do you remember the highest salary you made as a teacher?
Probably, I don't know, about 18,000 maybe.
At the very, very most. Teachers did not make anything at all many, many years ago. I mean, it was just impossible to live. I can remember my first teaching job. I made clear $62 one 2-week period and $61 and something the second 2-week period. Clear. That's what I made.
Clear.
So I made about $30 a week, making less than $1 an hour in teaching, because we spent hours, as you know that, we spent hours and hours in working there. Somewhere along the line, you got married.
Yes, I married Ralph Granger.
Ralph Granger. Tell us about Ralph Granger, his family, and where you met him, and how, when you got married, and so forth and so on.
I met him when I came home at Christmas time, about my sophomore year in college.
In college. That would have probably been 1941, 40, 41, somewhere
41.
in that area.
40. I went with my friend into Zarles.
And your friend who was at that time was who?
Was Louise Casto.
Louise Casto, a Wadsworth girl.
And Ralph was sitting at the counter.
Zarles. Tell us a little bit about Zarles and where it was located.
Zarles was where...
An ice cream place.
Yes, it was, but there's a dentist there now. It was on the corner and on the square, on the south.
On the southeast corner of the square in Wadsworth. And Zarles was kind of an ice cream place, was it not? I mean,
Yes.
they had
Yeah.
some sandwiches, but it was mostly ice cream.
And Vera Mae Gwynn, who was a classmate of mine, worked in there. And so anyway, we went home. I didn't think any more about it, but I had seen him. And I told Louise, that's mine.
That's yours. That's yours. He's yours.
So later on, Vera called and said, there's somebody that wants to talk to you. And so New Year's Eve was the first time that we ever went out.
Now, where was Ralph? And did he go to school here? How old was he?
He graduated from Wadsworth High.
And how old was he? How many years older than you was he?
He's 4 years older.
4 years older.
And then he graduated from Ohio U with a degree in civil engineering.
Civil engineering, right.
And,
where did the Grangers live, and who were they here in town?
well, they came from Akron. His father was a native. His mother came from Poland. And his uncles were engineers. They had a construction company in Cleveland called Mullins and Masters. And then his dad was also a carpenter. And the reason that they came to Wadsworth was that E.J. Young called them to come down and help build some of his buildings, and then they worked on the...
We have a picture here that we don't have anywhere at all, and this is a picture of the nurses' home down where the old hospital was, and they were building an addition to it. Is that right?
Right.
What year would this have been?
Well, it had to be in the very early 20s.
Early 20s. And right there is
Ralph's father.
Homer Granger. And where did they live in town?
They lived right across from the old Tom Bryant's grandparents. What the heck's their name? She was a Schaefer.
You mean Thelma Schaefer?
The one that lived up on the, right across from the family Rittman family practice.
Oh, the Schaefers across the road. Oh, I mean, they lived where the doctor's offices are on High Street.
Yeah, right across the street in the big mansion there.
Right across this, they lived there?
And then Ralph's lived out here on Broad Street, right next to Hanchey's. And then there was a service station on the corner of Hartman Road and Broad Street.
Carly's.
Right, and they lived up the street in a brick house.
In a brick house west of Hartman Road, on the north side of the road.
On the yes.
Yeah, on the north side of the road. Okay, that's where the Grangers lived. Now I'm a little unclear about the mansion. Who lived there?
The Schaefers.
Oh, the Schaefers lived. Oh yes, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And how were they related to the?
Well, they're not related, but Ralph's home was right across from her parents, and I can't think of their name, and it lived on the farm.
Oh,
Falk, yeah.
The Falk farm. Okay,
Yeah,
okay, all right. Okay, now. In other words, they lived across from the Falk farm on Broad Street.
Right.
Okay, got it. Now we have that straightened out. I couldn't understand where the Schaefers came in. In other words, you're trying to identify.
Kind of roundabout way.
Well, that's the way we have to do it. And the Falk farm is that old farmhouse there, which has stair steps for the roof.
Yeah.
You and Ralph got married, and then what did you do, and what did he do?
He went to work for Homer Bricker, who was then Medina County engineer, as a deputy, and I quit. I was teaching in Orville at the time.
At where?
Orville.
At Orville at the time.
And since he went to Medina, and I taught in Orville, and we only had one car, it was a little difficult, so I quit.
You quit.
I quit.
And he stayed in Medina County.
I stayed in Medina.
And then what did he do in Medina County?
He
For
was
many,
the
many
deputy,
years.
and he worked on the roads and the county maps and all of that. And then he was the engineer for a while, and then he decided to leave and go to AC&Y as an engineer for them.
Okay, now ACNY was Akron, Canton, Youngstown Railroad Company, and they were located where?
In Akron.
In Akron.
Okay.
And now when you say that he went for an engineer, he didn't drive the train. He was an engineer
in the office.
In the office as a civil engineer there in the office.
Right.
The ACNY Railroad was very, very strong during those days, and it has subsided as many railroads have now, but are they still in operation, do you know?
Yes, as far as I know.
And what do they do? Where do they travel?
Probably about to the edge of the state of Ohio, and that's as far as it goes.
And does it come through Wadsworth anymore?
I don't believe so.
Doesn't
I
it
don't
go
think
through
so.
Sharon Center?
Well, up there, but I don't think it
Not here in
does.
Wadsworth. It goes
know.
to that one track which is just south of Sharon Center. And it goes to the edge of the Ohio and back.
And back, and that's it. And
Or is that the Barberton Belt line? I'm not sure.
no,
It's AC and Y.
AC and
Okay,
Y.
fine. Tell us a little bit about sisters. Brother unfortunately passed on, and we don't have much, to go on there, but B and Jean and Kay.
B was a secretary most of her life. She seemed to end up
And where?
being a secretary for the CEOs. They traveled a lot and lived in different towns. So she always had to change jobs, and that was she ended up being a secretary. And they never had any children.
Oh, we forgot yours. What about your children?
No.
Let's hear about those now.
I have two daughters, Lorraine McCammon, who lives on North Street, and Nadine F. lives on Treese Road.
Now, which McCammon did Lorraine marry?
Leon.
Leon McCammon. Leon McCammon is from a family of about 10 boys and girls. They lived in Silver Creek. Forrest McCammon was the father. They have Faye as the oldest sister, and Dallas, and then Jean, Clyde, Leon, somewhere in that area. Buddy was Forrest. Then they have a girl, a younger girl. That whole family.
Lorraine went to Baldwin Wallace also.
Did she?
Graduated and spent her junior year at the University of Americas in Mexico City.
Oh, really? Doing what?
Spanish, studying Spanish.
My brother was there he taught there for a while as a visiting professor.
Frank?
Yes. His background is in Spanish. He taught there. As a matter of fact, just before he retired from teaching at the State University of New York in Albany, he was invited to apply for the presidency of the University of Americas, and he declined it because at that time he was close to 70 years of age. Well, yeah, about 65 to 70, and he didn't want to go that route anymore. It was just a little too old. Now he's completely retired, but he's still very active in that. Excuse me. What does your daughter do now? What does Lorraine do now?
Well, she's working at the truck stops of America right now. But she went to New York after she graduated, and she worked in a brokerage firm. She worked in a haberdashery. She did
all the kinds of things. That's right, the things that you really broaden your scope on, the things like that. Now, is Leon still living? Your son-in-law?
Oh, yes.
One of the McCammons died. Well, who was it? Was it?
Well, I don't know all of them, so I'm
And what about the grandchildren from the McCammons? No grandchildren?
No grandchildren.
No grandchildren.
No grandchildren.
Okay. And now, what about your other daughter?
She had two children, and she went to Ashland College.
And whom did she marry? You told us, but
Roger Neff.
Oh, Roger Neff, that's right. And were they the ones from River Styx?
I don't think so. I don't know much about him, the family. But her children are by her first husband.
Oh, I see.
And that was Sterling Bowes.
Oh, Sterling Bowes, young Sterling, not the one who's 70-something.
Young Sterling.
Not the one who's our contemporary.
And they had a son and a daughter. And the daughter has given me 4 great-grandchildren.
No kidding, 4 great-grandchildren. Here's
2 boys and 2 girls.
2 boys. And where do they live?
Here in Wadsworth and in Worcester.
Worcester.
Some of them. So.
Jean married?
Jean married Leroy George.
Leroy George.
And he was a mechanic.
Right.
And
Leroy and Jean were high school sweethearts.
Yes. And but at the time, she was going with Ray Morrison.
Ray Morrison. Who married Winona
But anyway,
Granger.
she didn't finish that one anyway.
No, how does
Changed
that?
Anyhow, he worked for Dad as a mechanic, and when he had the
Threshing.
shop, Wagner's service and sales out on the road before he died, and tried to go to live in Florida, but he didn't make it.
Didn't make it.
Make it down there.
So, and I guess I'm so shocked that Jean is gone. I didn't realize that she died. How old was she when she died?
50.
50. Wow, that's young. That's scary. And what about Kay? Little Kay, the wee little Kay.
Little Kay, well, she grew up by herself, really. You know, she was so much younger than we were that we've just gotten to know each other in our later years. And she just retired and is learning to slow down and do things and enjoy herself.
She's a bright girl. Very, very bright girl.
And,
now, we promised we talked about threshing. This is something that,
right.
that probably no one who was born within the past 50 years or 40 years would know anything about threshing. Tell us about the whole threshing industry. And what was it required, what was it like, and the whole thing? Machinery?
I think Grandpa had the last steam engine that there was in the area. I can remember it sitting in the yard, and it seemed so huge to me.
Oh, it was huge. I remember it myself.
Probably one of those tires weighed about a ton.
But they were steel tires.
The back, right, with the cleats in them. And then
I think probably they might even go more than a ton.
Then they went to the Huber, you called it, and I can remember the big long belt.
Yes.
Probably 100 feet long.
Easily.
That went from the tractor to the threshing
The power
machine.
takeoff of the tractor to the machine, and then it was always, the belt would not go as a belt would. They always had to crisscross it.
Right.
Because the tractor power takeoff went one direction and the machine had to go the other, so they actually reversed the belt to do that. Remember that?
That's right.
And it was a thick, wide belt, about 8 inches or so wide.
Oh, at least.
At least that wide. And it ran from the tractor to the threshing machine on the barn floor.
That's right.
That's right.
And I can remember one time when I was little, they said, you go ahead and throttle it up, you know. Well, I did, clear up to the top.
And boy, that belt went flying.
That machine was jumping off of the floor, you know. So it's a wonder I didn't get paddled for doing that.
Did you ever thresh with your dad?
Oh yes, I went quite often, and when he used to take the baler out, I stuck the wires, but I was too little to get the bale off of the end of the machine.
No, it's pretty heavy. They weigh 50 to 80 pounds.
Put it on the...
Now, when you say you stuff the wires, tell us about stuffing the wires and how they make the wires so tight on bales of hay. How do they do that?
Well, they had to stick a board in the end of it, and then they fed the machine, and as it did, those boards compressed it
really, really hard
into a bale, and there would be a slot in there, and those wires had to go through there, and then they were automatically tied.
Well, they were automatically tied later, but before they used to have to tie them by hand.
Yep, right.
And how then would they make them so tight?
Well, they must have had a little machine, you know, that they could pull, because it, you know.
Well, they would do it by hand, and then when the bale came out and it lost its compression, they would just pop out, and that would just make that just super, super tight. That's where the threshing machine worked.
Is that the way it worked?
I watched it time and time and time. Oh, it's the most fascinating thing in the world. Describe what a threshing machine looks like if you were to identify it going down the road, and then how they would bring the goosenecks out and things of this nature. Tell us about that.
Well, it was probably about 30, 40 feet long,
At least that looked like a big camper.
about 10 feet, no, 8, 10 feet tall. It wouldn't be that high.
Oh, yeah.
It had all kinds of belts on it, wheels, and yeah, and conveyor, the conveyor out in the front with the rollers that took the grain into the machine.
Now they would have this thing set up on the barn floor. That was the bank barn. They would have the second floor, and then they would take the gooseneck, which was, as I remember, was laid back over the threshing machine in some way. They would take that gooseneck and they would put that out to make the straw stack. Then they'd bring the conveyor out, and then they would put the shocks of wheat, or not the shocks, but the bundles of wheat which were in shocks, head first. I can still remember your father doing this. He would say, for instance, a person made a mistake or something like that, he would always go, point to his head, and then put like this, head first, which meant that you're supposed to put the shock in first.
I see.
And then the shock, or the bundle would go up there into the machine, and some rubber teats would take all of the grain off and separate the straw, which would then go out onto the hay pile, or onto the straw stack. And just the most fascinating thing in the world. We've had a couple of people talk about threshing, but we've never had anyone who has been able to tell us about what is required. Say, for instance, the night before threshing would occur, what did your dad have to do? Do you remember that?
Well, you always have to grease your machine and make sure that it's in running order. You get your belts ready and travel to wherever you're going to.
You would always take it the night before and set up, because the following day you had to...
They covered the whole area around here, all of the farmers, and I think there was another one in Norton, Miller, Mr. Miller,
and also
and
Hummel.
Kreider down on 94. And they worked together, you know, if they got in a bind where there was too much for one person. And then, well, when I got to be about 15 or so, business, then the combines came, and that kind of killed the threshing business.
That's right. The threshing, I don't think you can see threshing anywhere, anywhere now except maybe in a museum. And once a year I go to a museum in Pennsylvania on threshing machines.
I see.
It made that much of an impression on me. And I watched them do it. And it's so much different from the days that I would, of course I was a little kid, but I would assist, you know, doing little running jobs and so forth, and staying away from the machinery and all of that, but I just absolutely loved to watch them thresh. Tell us about, just out of curiosity, what kind of remuneration would your father receive for a full day's work, bringing on the machine ahead of time, spending probably 3 or 4 hours preparing the machine, the initial cost of the machine, maintaining it, storing it, and so forth? What kind of money would he come home with after days of threshing? What would he charge a farmer to thresh his business?
I really don't know.
I doubt it was more than $20 or $30.
It couldn't have been. And they were given their meals.
Oh yes, and the good meals too.
For everyone.
For the farm ladies, this was their event of the year. They would have meals that was always extraordinary, exquisite, extraordinary. Did you ever go to any of those farm meals?
No.
No. You probably get arrested for saying this right now, but women weren't allowed to threshing except in the kitchen. They had no women whatsoever doing any threshing. It was all men. Of course, it was very heavy work too, and dirty
very
work.
heavy, very hot.
Very, very heavy and hot and dirty.
Right. You get the straw down your back.
Oh, boy, it's horrible.
Stand there
yeah.
and itch all afternoon.
That's right. And you perspire, and the straw would itch even that much
right.
more.
Yeah.
Do you remember your father talking about the people whom he would bring along to build the straw stack, and what the
Well, three of the people that worked with him quite regularly were Clarence Aker,
Clarence Aker from Durban Drive,
Mike Reed, and Lester Brown.
Les Brown, right? And what would they do? What were their functions particularly?
Well, oftentimes they were the ones that fed the machines and helped with the stacks, and that's dirty. That's hard.
Very hard
because
work.
you're right in the middle of the whole stack, and it's blowing on you, and you have to build it just right so that it doesn't fall over on you.
There's a real art to building a straw stack.
Yes.
The straw stack would turn out to be maybe 40 or 50 feet high.
Oh,
well, not 50, maybe 40. At least, I'll bet 40 feet high. Probably 30 feet deep, 20 to 30 feet deep.
At least.
And lengthwise, what, 50 to 75 feet, wasn't it? A big straw stack.
It covers the whole. It would cover the whole yard.
The whole barnyard, right. And then the cows would come and eat from it, and it would
just gradually.
Gradually, and they would drop down then, because it would look as almost like a great big mushroom after the cows would eat that. And of course, they stomped on it, and they their excrement would be there, and that's where they would pick up their manure then. And they would throw the manure out into the barnyard, and then they would pick up the manure and put it in the manure spreaders and take it out to the fields. How long did your grandfather do this? Oh, and you had mentioned about your grandfather having had the last steam engine. Do you remember the steam engines at all?
No.
Well, I do remember them, and one of the things that they really proclaimed heavily when the gasoline engines came out, that they didn't have to worry about the fires, because the steam engines were obviously fed by coal and wood.
Right.
And one spark could cause a disaster, because that very, very dry, tinder, ready straw would just go up in like a...
Yeah, they did have one fire like that, and they when the thresher was on the floor, and it just went right down through the bottom of the barn.
Oh yes. Do you remember whose it was and when it was?
It was on Reimer Road, in the middle of the hill, just before you get to the Long Farm. That was down there by 57. John Long's farm.
Oh, John Long over there. Way over there then.
Right.
By Herger's or somewhere close to there.
That's right.
And do you remember when that happened and what?
Oh, I was pretty young when that happened, because I
In the
just
20s then.
vaguely remember it.
It burned the barn all the way down, did it? See, the sparks would, and all that.
Oh, yeah.
That was, you have to.
Scary.
It certainly was. You have to thrash on a very dry day. And it's always very, very hot, especially for oats.
Oh, yes.
Very hot, and that's the straw, wee little pieces of straw would just like snowflakes. And one match and boom. And I know that men were not permitted to smoke or bring any matches or anything like that around, because it was just so quick. Now, the other point that we haven't talked about in terms of the threshing was the storage of this. This was a huge machine. Where would he keep it?
Well, he built garages out behind the house to
And
keep
do you
them
remember after the war what kind of garages he built?
One was a big cement one, and then he built one that was 3 times that large right behind the house. And so that's where he kept them. That's where he had his sales and service, and later on.
Avery Wagner was a farmer. He called himself a gentleman farmer. He, I believe, was the first and only farmer who was a Rotarian. Is that correct?
That's right.
He belonged to Rotary Club. And I
Right.
think that he was one of the first, and I don't know if any other farmers have come to Rotary, but he was very active in that. Tell us a little bit about the personality of Avery Wagner.
No, he was very easygoing,
But all business.
but all business,
Yes.
very good. And he stayed in politics and local government. He was on the school board, and they fought about the money just like they do today.
Sure, they always will.
If he said he was going to do something, he did it.
You bet.
You bet.
You bet. Now, was he ever a township trustee?
I beg your pardon?
Was he ever a township trustee?
Yes, for quite a few years.
Many, many years, a
Many
township
years.
trustee, was a township trustee.
He also had a grader, and I can remember him grading a road where the present Crestwood Street is.
Crestwood, right.
Right.
At that time, it was the dirt, a dirt road.
All of it,
Yeah.
it was just all open.
And how was, this was not a motorized grader, was it?
Oh, no.
How did it work?
It was kind of small, and it had a blade that you changed back and forth.
But what did you have to do? You had to pull it
I think he had to pull it with the tractor.
with the tractor, that's right. Then you'd have one man on the grader, and all
That's
of the leverage for the levers for the grader itself, the blade, excuse me, were all manual. And
That's
you would
right.
have to turn wheels and
That's
so
right.
forth and
That's right.
push it back and forth, and that's the way they used to do it. As a matter of fact, even the Medina or the Wadsworth Township road grader, until they got a motorized one, which was a Galleon, probably in 1938, 39, 40, something like that. Before that, it was all done by being pulled by either a tractor or a truck, and they would have to do all of this turning by hand. It was a tremendous job. What did he do with the grader, and why did he have it? He didn't have it for fun. I mean, it's not a toy.
No, it was a part of his work and his trade. I don't know what he did with it later on.
No, they weren't very big, but
No.
some of those were very interesting.
I can remember his baler he sold to a group of Amish gentlemen.
The baler, the horse-drawn baler.
And they came up, and of course they were speaking German.
Right.
What they didn't know was that he could understand
Your
what they
dad
were
understood
talking
German
about.
very well.
Yes, because Grandpa was, he was a Pennsylvania Dutch.
Right. And the old Pennsylvania Dutch spoke German.
That's right.
One of the problems that I had is learning to speak English. I had told you earlier that Harriet Gates' mother taught our family, the four of us, to speak English. One of the problems we had was that all of our neighbors were Pennsylvania Dutch, and some of the words that we learned as small children were German words. And when I went to the service, the examining physician asked me if I had any problems, and I told him that I had a bealed ear. Well, he had never heard of a bealed ear, and he just sat and laughed and laughed and laughed. What that meant was that they had a hole in your eardrum. But that's what the old Pennsylvania Dutch would call a hole in a bealed ear. And they laughed and laughed and laughed. He even called his friends over and said, "Look, this guy has a bealed ear. Have you ever heard of a bealed ear?" Well, they didn't. And then some other words that we used, that I went to centralized also, and we were all, from the farm areas, many Mennonites, and the rest were Pennsylvania Dutch. We were the only non-Pennsylvania Dutch there, probably. And a lot of the words that they used were not words which we typically use in our everyday parlance today. So, I had not only had to overcome learning English, but then I had to overcome learning English as I was taught English in my neighborhood, which was all Pennsylvania Dutch at the time, as you well know. Tell us a little bit more about what your dad would do in the wintertime then, since he couldn't thresh, and he...
I didn't. I think they plowed snow and things like that.
Because and so any money that he made, he had to make in the summertime. And there was very little to be made, even though, you know, $20 or $30 or something like that was quite a bit in those days. But that's, I can still remember the farmer saying, "It will cost me $20 to thresh this week." That was a lot of money. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your mother. She was a stay-at-home mom all of the time.
Yes.
But tell us that she was a beautiful person in so many ways. Tell us about her.
Well, she was very quiet, good cook, spent a lot of time with us, and very easygoing.
Now, all of you girls look like your mother, is that right?
No,
You don't think so?
no. B looks like Grandma Wagner,
Okay.
and I look like Dad with hair.
Dad with hair. He was bald.
Yes. And Jean is kind of a cross.
Cross between.
And Kay doesn't look like any of us.
No, she doesn't. She's well, she looks a little. She has a little bit of the of your features, as I remember.
We all have features that are similar, but we don't look alike, and we certainly aren't alike.
Right. Now that we haven't touched on the Grangers, tell us about the Granger families, who their relatives are, and where they, what they
Well,
did.
they were from Cleveland, and Dad was English, Mother was Polish, and she came over from the old country when she was real tiny, and finished school. And when they got married, and they lived up there in Cleveland, or when Ralph was born, and she was a very good seamstress. She did sewing for all of the ladies in Cleveland.
Ralph died, how many years ago?
28 years.
Boy, it seems almost possible.
He was 54.
He was a young man. I remember when he died, he was very, very young. You have been a widow then for 28 years. And what do you do now? What do you do with yourself now? Do you play anywhere? Do you?
Well, after he died, I decided I needed something different to do, so I bought an organ and took lessons from Sarah Hammerschmidt Ritter.
From Ritter, from Medina.
And, yes, she was in school, in college with me.
Same time as you were.
She could just make an organ sit up and talk.
Oh yeah, she
it was wonderful.
She was great.
So I took lessons from her for 2 years, and then I played for the Christian church here.
In Wadsworth.
Reverend Gould was, and right after Randy had taken over as choir director. And,
Randy Leatherman.
yes. And so I stayed there for several years, and then I moved to Canton.
As a matter of fact, I substituted for you one Sunday.
Is that right?
Many, many years ago. I can't remember when it was, but I substituted for you.
And I've played ever since. And today I play at two churches, one at 9 o'clock and one at 10:30.
And where's that?
In Akron. They're both Presbyterian churches.
Which ones?
Margaret Park, which is on Russell Avenue.
Russell Avenue. I know where that is exactly.
Allenside, which is on Rexford.
Which is down right off the expressway.
Right.
I gave a talk there. As a matter of fact, as you know, I'm Roman Catholic. I gave the sermon at the Allenside Presbyterian Church one night.
Is that right?
I don't know why they invited me, but I gave the sermon. Now, at the Allenside, as I remember, the organ is what? Electronic, is it not?
Yes, it's an Allen.
And I don't know about the one at
And the other one is a Hammond.
Hammond. Now, the Hammond is no longer made, is it? They don't make Hammonds anymore.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Is it an old Hammond that?
It's old and very tired.
Very tired. They're difficult to play too. They're hard to get to sound like a pipe organ. The Allen, however, can.
Oh, I love the Allen. As a matter of fact, that's the kind that I had when I bought one.
Oh, you bought the Allen, the big one? Wow! In your home? Where are you living now then, Maxine?
Oh, I don't have it anymore. I got rid of it. But no, I live out here in the trailer park.
Oh, the trailer park in Wadsworth? That's on Wilson Road, you mean?
Right.
And you have a trailer then. Now, you enjoy that kind of hominess, don't you?
Well, it's all right. It's all I need.
Oh,
And,
yes. Not too much to clean.
You got everything that you need right there.
Well, that's wonderful. Great.
So,
And you still drive, of course.
yes, I do.
You do everything that you used to do. As a matter of fact,
Shovel snow and all of the things I shouldn't do.
Well, I don't know why you shouldn't do it. It doesn't seem to hurt you much. Your weight has always been, matter of fact, all of you girls have always been trim.
Pretty much.
Now, you're trimmer than your mother was.
Yes, yes. She was heavy. Of course, she was also shorter, and
Yeah.
so, like Kay is small, and B looks just like Grandma Wagner, and Grandma was a fantastic cook, and when they lived out on 261 when we were little, all of the hobos that went through came by. I think they must have marked a pole or something.
I think they do, because they used to do that with my mother too. And
Right.
They would go by several houses, come right into our place. And
Right, because they knew they were going to get a meal there.
That's right. Tell us, you had mentioned about the hobos. Do you remember the gypsies that used to come on Gypsy Lane on Hartman Road? What do you remember about them?
Well, now it escapes me.
Well, they would camp there. As a matter of fact, 1,000 feet from your house, would they not? The gypsies.
Oh,
When they would camp on Hartman Road.
that I don't remember.
You don't remember those? They would be in the 20s. They would camp there. That's why they called it Gypsy Lane, And then they changed it to Hartman Road. We had several people. Geneva Weltzing's ancestors are the Hartmans, and that was named after those people. Somewhere along the line, I saw another Gypsy Lane in western Ohio, and I always thought it was very quaint to have a Gypsy Lane. Of course, I think it's probably illegal to have something like that, but it was a name that we called Hartman Road all of the time. We're going to run out of time, and we have 3 or 4 quickie questions here that I want to ask you. When you were growing up, what were some of the the activities that people at your age group consider to be, far out, right now, drugs and so forth. What did people your age fear? What were the things that people would say to you, don't get involved with this or don't get involved with that? Did we have any of that when you were growing up?
Well, if they did, I didn't pay too much attention to it.
Because you weren't allowed to become involved anyway. That's right.
That's right. I had plenty to do to keep me busy, and interests and work.
You bet.
And so I didn't have that kind of a personal problem.
The other question, I wanted to hear you say that, because we keep on saying that teenagers have always had these kinds of problems. I don't know whether we had all these kinds of problems, as teenagers.
Well, I know that it was around, but
we
didn't have it on the scale
that we have it right now
today.
Did you work anywhere when you were in high school?
No. Yeah, I think I worked where Bradley's is.
Right, El Commodore.
Miss Hyman
El Commodore.
Had a restaurant there. I think I worked for her for
the El Commodore.
A little bit, right. And Jean worked there also.
Yes, that's right.
Oh.
Yes.
She also worked for Stone Ears.
Yeah, Mabel, yeah, she worked for Stone Ears too, but Mabel Hindman, Hindman, who was the principal of what is now Isham School, after Vernon V. Isham went to the service. Mabel Hyman owned that store, that restaurant, the El Commodore. She was Mabel Becker at that time. She had married Becker. And Becker died. As a matter of fact, he went to the doctor's office, he got a clean bill of health, walked out, dropped over dead. So anytime I go to the doctor now, he says, I'm going to give you a clean bill of health, don't do that. Just tell me something's wrong, because I'm afraid that I'll drop over dead when I walk out of your office here today. And Gene worked for Stone Years too.
Right.
Girls did not really do a lot of the...
No, not like they do today.
No. You stayed home and all of that.
You learn to sew and cook and
You
all,
surely
do all
did.
of those things.
Maxine, we have come to the end of the hour. These are so quick, so fast.
Oh my,
We
we've only gotten started.
Just got started, that's right, exactly. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we now have on our History for Perpetuity, the Avery Wagner and his family story. Thank you again.
Thank you for asking.